Hello, welcome to the Crackpot
Won't you lend your lungs to me?
Podcast.
Mine are collapsing. Plant my feet and bitterly breathe up the time that's passed. Breath I'll take and breath I'll give. Pray the day's not poised. Stand among the ones that live in lonely indecision.
Hello, James.
Hey, Lynn.
Welcome to the Crackpot Podcast. You're the Crackpot.
Oh, well, I feel welcome.
Well, I had to kick off this podcast because we were just talking a little bit of business, and I thought that you listeners would like to hear about it. So, James just finished a latest project. Which one is that, James?
Yusuf of the Dusk. It's actually a sequel to The Jericho Bone, which only sold 2 copies. So I don't have high hopes for it. But it's a standalone novella about an oversexed short guy. He's always seeking maximum advantage, So he thinks of himself as a guy that gets his business done either right before dawn or right as night's falling. He likes to catch people off guard. So there's no autobiographical basis whatsoever for the character, Yusuf.
It's an act of pure creation. Well, James was telling me that Yusuf of the Dusk is currently, when it reaches me, it will appear in the Baskerville Old. Is that right?
Baskerville Boldface.
Bold.
I think that's right. Baskerville Boldface. I don't know. I like it. The first letter in the sentence, if you capitalize it, it looks like big and important. And I kind of always like that. It's the only reason why I like to read illuminated manuscripts. So I hate Calibri. I'm bored to death with Times Roman after writing in it for 20 years. And the new default is Calibri, which I absolutely hate.
Yeah.
The default's always 11-point Calibri. Okay, so I can't even read that. I usually like Bookman Antigua or something like that.
Bookman Old. Yeah, is it Bookman Old or Baskerville? I guess they're.
Well,
those are the two.
I'm bored with Bookman, so I felt like I felt semi-creative, so I did Baskerville. And you'll put it in its proper typeface. I know it's just something I use I used to do everything in Comic Sans. So.
Right. That was what prompted me to go ahead and kick off this podcast, because we have to talk about Comic Sans.
It's my favorite font.
Why?
I mean, the cover of like my first 20 books are all in Comic Sans.
Almost all the Harm City books are in Comic Sans.
Yeah. It's great.
No.
It makes me think of standing outside of a liquor store in Baltimore, looking at the script on the wall.
It's so bad.
I respect the sacred documents of the city of my birth. So hence I like to write in Comic Sans whenever I can get away with it.
Comic Sans is very bad. One reason it's bad is because it's sans. It doesn't have a serif on it. So it doesn't. I feel that it's harder to read. You don't feel it's harder to read?
No, it actually makes me feel lighthearted about reading. I really like it. I don't know what it is. Maybe because when I read it, I'm less embarrassed about my own attempts at handwriting. I don't know.
My handwriting's pretty bad, I'll tell you that. But I think that when I edited Autumn in a Dying City, I left it in Comic Sans.
Oh, good girl.
But someday, when I reread and edit all your entire Harm City catalog, I'm going to come up with a new Harm City look. It really can't be Comic Sans. But going back to the other one, I learned how to put drop caps into a Word document. You know what that is? That's when the first letter of the chapter has, it's large. And it sits there on the page.
Oh, okay. That's what I'm trying to achieve by using Baskerville.
Yeah. So when I have, when you see Thunderbird, in hard copy. It has that. I did it for Thunderbird.
I might have to get one. I don't have any of my books anymore, but
I
maybe
know.
that's it. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds very nice, and maybe you can come up with a new font for the, whenever you redo the Harm City stuff. Maybe we can call it Ghetto Sans. Ghetto Serif?
Yeah, that would be my preference.
Okay.
But I've also been using different fonts on the bookstore, the bookstore that's under construction for my graphics there. So I don't know if you had any.
Thank you for your attention to detail.
I don't know if you had any thoughts on those.
I just like the bookstores. I'm just thrilled that you did it, and I'm looking forward to seeing the rest of them when they're done. It's a big project. So thanks a lot.
You've written a lot of books.
Well, my goal is to get these next 17 off my chest.
Okay.
And then hopefully never come up with another idea for a book again. Okay, but I don't know. It doesn't seem to work that way.
No, I don't think so. Let me see. I'm looking at my famous spreadsheet, and I'm going to count how many books.
I read it every day.
It's updated most every day. It's important. According to my spreadsheet, you have published 147 books. Published.
Okay, that's not counting the 14 that are stacked like phone books on your chair right now.
Correct. Yeah. Okay. So it's really more like 160 that you've completed. 147, well, not technically in print. A couple of those were suppressed, of course. And some of these are anthologies and things like that. But 147 titles. Jeez, you're crazy.
I prefer insane to crazy. Crazy takes a light view of it. I want to have gravity now that I'm old and bald and starting to malform in various ways. So I'll go with insane. Speaking of which, what did you think of Iron and Ice?
I finished Iron Ice, and I liked it. It was, it's about an evil woman, and all the men that she torments through time. What?
I can't imagine I wrote such a thing.
Yeah, who, me? Yeah.
It's a rewrite of a novella titled Winter.
Okay.
I decided to rewrite it and added material that was relevant because I just liked that female villainess so much that I had to use her in another story. And so I put them all together in Iron Ice. But it's the same idea as, with that Jericho bone, I inserted a character in there that's a horror villain. Just to really try to make it something that would be categorized as a horror story instead of as a historical novel, because I knew the historical novel route wasn't going to sell at all because it's set in an Islamic country. But then as I'm trying to faithfully reproduce what actually happened during this famine in 1201 in Egypt, I found myself going to the horror villain as kind of like a light edge, a way to lighten it up
like a relief, yeah.
Yeah. So I decided, well, you know what? This guy's not that bad. He's like the best guy in the story, other than the doctor, the little Hebrew boy, and let me see, Yusuf, the guy that just ends up starring in his own novella after he screws up a whole full-length novel. So I figured that he had to be a guy that's this cool, that he has to have an estranged wife. And she's got to be even more horrible than he is. She's not cool. She's just horrible. He's horrible and he's cool. Okay, so that's Janot. For those 2 or 3 people that have read any of this stuff, Janot, his ex-wife, Janot is the character that's also in Hemivore, that did with S.L. James. His story is in Drink Deep of Night, okay, which I've sold one of. Probably my sister bought it because her artwork's on the cover. The character Jeannot, his ex-wife, is the stone cold bitch of winter that is the villainess in Iron and Ice. Okay.
What I think is important about this awful woman is that she has her own team of big, strong guys that help her to terrorize her victims.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, she's got to be a bitch with gravity. I gave her Lewis Wetzel. It was. No, I mean, you got to be really touchy about killing Native Americans or Amerindians in fiction anymore, unless you find yourself, in the far reaches of the publishing universe. So when I wanted to kill some Shawnees and terrorize them with Lewis Wetzel, I figured the best way to do it would be to have a woman telling him to do it, because anytime you can slide vaginal authority in there. If you're going to commit atrocities in literature against people of color, then you definitely want to have a female giving the orders. It can't be like some white Manhattan construction magnate with a bad toupee and orange skin giving the orders. It's got to be a woman. It's got to be someone with vaginal authority.
Yeah, even a woman of color, if you can find one, would be good.
This chick has no color at all.
That's right. She's just the winter ice. Yeah.
That's all right. She's still got the chick thing going.
Yeah. Yeah. She's clearly female. She's not really even human.
Right. She's an extraterrestrial.
Right.
Which actually makes her, that puts her in the perfect demographic for people that you should have compassion for in our country, because she's not she's an illegal alien. I mean, an extremely illegal alien.
Yeah,
she's a terrestrial alien.
Okay, but there is one thing about her, though. This is curious to me. In the earlier part of her reign of terror, she's got a crew of big, strong dudes. But then later, in the part that's kind of in the modern day, she has like rats and some kind of Igor servant or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, she's got it's like 4G warfare.
Mm.
Yeah. I mean, you can't be some towelhead and stand up with your RPG and try to knock one of these new fighters out of the sky. I mean, you got to go after like the supply depot or something like that. You've got to do underhanded stuff. Well, once the enemy gets so big and monstrous, you got to start using your wits. So, when she's terrorizing the Romans, I gave her some big Irish guys to do some bad business with. But, how are you going to terrorize people in a postmodern American city like Baltimore? Rats, hood rats, and so
rats and hood rats.
Yeah. And she even terrorizes hood rats too. I mean,
certainly.
She's a stone cold bitch. I mean, one day I'll write, her and Jeannot's divorce proceedings or something like that. They're not officially like legally divorced. Okay, the separation happened when they were in orbit, so it's actually kind of like an accidental separation. So they just been apart for like 74,000 years. So I might do a reconciliation one day. Yeah.
That's very Greek, right? Where the gods, get mad at each other and then they fight, and us poor hapless observers get all sorts of side effects, collateral damage.
Yes, this is the tragedy of being human, but we deserve it.
We've earned it.
Just look at all the stuff we do. It's ridiculous. I saw this thing. I'm in the Rocky Mountains with like a real mountain man, a guy that grew up like every day after school. He's already got his deer rifle in the pickup truck, and him and his buddy are heading out to the hills to kill stuff. And he takes me up to one of his hallowed hunting spots. Him and his eldest son, who's a total stud. Guy looks like an MMA champion or something, his oldest son. So we're all fixing for a good day. I'm the bird dog. I thought I was going to go along and like pick berries and rose hips and continue upon my astrolopithine origin ways, but they decide they want to use me as a bird dog. So I'm trying to flush grouse down this mountain. So yeah, that doesn't work. So I'm going to go bird dog it at this other place. It's like the best hunting spot ever. And this place is huge. It's like this 13-tiered mountain that spreads for miles. Last weekend, it was the biggest trailer park I've ever seen in my life.
Oh, what was going on?
People getting away. Suburban.
Oh, it was the last weekend of summer, basically, yeah.
And you know what? It's been that way all summer in these other canyons, okay? But it was even worse for Labor Day weekend. There was probably 3,000 people on this one mountain. Each group of people, each family's got at least $100K of hardware to get them up there. There's the $35,000, Dodge Ram pickup truck. There's the, 34 to 48 foot long house that they're dragging along with it.
Yeah, the fifth wheel, they call them, yeah.
Then there's a trailer behind that.
Yeah, with the four-wheelers and the dirt bikes.
These people have all the shit that the bad guys in the next Road Warrior movie should have. So I'm looking at it.
I wonder how much fuel they're dragging up, too, for all the
they had guns. They were out hunting. They had dogs.
Yeah, that's the boomer life.
Okay, but when you think about it, there's a lot of different blueprints for how the end time is going to go down. And the guy that wrote the main source book on, I think, was an ex-Army intelligence guy that studied refugee patterns. And he said, these people from these cities, they're just going to empty the cities out, and they're going to go. It's going to be like the Golden Horde, and they're going to be like locusts, and they're just going to pick everything clean. Well, ahead of them is going to be a horde of these things. This town is so small that I'm living right now in a basement 3 doors from the post office. And I'm just about at the edge of town. The post office is in the middle of town, okay?
Yeah.
And by the post office in this little town, every 5 minutes, one of these things rolls by, this little mechanical caravan with a family of people in it. Right. So if the grid goes down, these people are going to have more gas than your regular animals. So they're going to be out here. So I'm thinking of maybe doing a novel set on this mountaintop. And because what's going to happen whenever things get really bad. And I think of I've only read reviews of it, and I read like the first 20 pages of it. But I had so much research to do, I couldn't continue reading this book. Camp of the Saints.
Yeah.
About this exodus from India, and all these people get on these boats and they go to France, and then thank God nothing like that ever happened.
Yeah.
People running all over.
It's kind of prophetic, yeah.
Right, the center of Western civilization. So I'm going to call this the Camp of the Sinners, okay? Because there's no way these rural people don't have a chance with this army of suburbanites in their mechanical caravans. They're going to be pouring out here. It's already making things unlivable. If you're within 200 miles of a major metropolitan area, you could be in the most remote wilderness there is. If there's a dirt road that gets there, there's going to be suburbanites rolling up there, throwing Mountain Dew bottles, okay, and Tasty Cake wrappers right on your front lawn, even if it's not a lawn, even if it's just a gravel pit. So, Camp of the Sinners, maybe someday I'll do it. I'm not going to put it on the queue yet, but I think it's something I want to put out there before the next presidential election, along with maybe there'll be a short story attached to the Filthy Few or something. I don't know.
Oh. Well, I'm really enjoying this because previously we heard all about the Baltimorean apocalyptic scenarios, and it was really useful to know those, but there's so much regional variation here in this country, so I love that rural Utah is getting the LaFond treatment.
Hey, I did see, I visited Salt Lake City.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a thriving population of mud sharks who apparently they import their own drones.
They bring them straight from Africa, right? Yeah.
Baltimore, I think. But I'm still working on proving that I'm a black man. If I can prove it, then maybe I'll hook up with a mud shark, and I won't have to write for a living anymore.
No, that's
I
not.
mean, as long as she's talking to me on the phone, she'll believe I'm a black man. It's just once we meet, she might have some doubt.
When I was making one of those graphics for the bookstore, and I used the paint bucket, it's to fill in the color. It filled in part of your stomach with the color. Like, your tummy was wide enough that it absorbed the paint from the paint bucket on the photo editor. So
I don't have a chance. No mud sharks for me. Hey, it's really funny. I'm in this IHOP with these two country boys from up in the mountains. They're going to go in the city and have breakfast. So I go in there with them, and this beautiful college-age mud shark comes in with her drone, okay, and he's following her obediently and everything like that. And they sit down, and they don't even look at the menus. She looks around, and she counts faces, and she sees that most of the people in the place are aging pale faces. And she just tells her man to get up and go, and they get up and go. There were too many white dudes in this joint for her, okay? Wow. And then the classic mud shark rolls up. I noticed it happen. I see it outside through the window. Nice SUV rolls up. This is the standard mud shark conveyance. Right. And because it gives you room for the groceries and the kids. And,
all right.
When your boyfriend's smoking his weed, there's more room, for the smoke. It doesn't cloud the ship immediately. So LL Cool J gets out of the passenger seat of this white SUV and stands behind this white SUV in abject obedience for a full 8 minutes.
You timed him.
He even goes through the queue. I mean, he's listening to rap videos and stuff on his smartphone. He's trying to keep himself occupied. And then finally, the SUV wobbles, and this mature matriarch mud shark gets out. Okay, she's a woman of grand proportions. A young woman at that, who must have heroically feasted as a child to get this big in her early 20s. And LL Cool J is like the teenage version of LL Cool J. He's not like the guy that you got now that's got all these muscles. This guy is like a narrow 125 pounds. There is no doubt who's in charge in this relationship. She's going about 360. She's actually a very pretty girl, okay? But she's about 360 pounds. And she starts waddling towards the door and shoos him ahead of her, and he prances up there and he holds the door open for her, okay? And then he goes in, he holds the other door open for her, and then she walks in, and then the girls that worked here were great. I mean, Mormon chicks are hot, okay? So it's a shame I didn't grow up around here. So
wholesome. They're wholesome.
I always like Marie Osmond, okay? So anyhow, the one head waitress asked the guy, how many? Okay. And he just backs up and he shakes his head. He don't know. Okay. I mean, it's obviously only 2. Okay. And he knows it's only 2, but see,
he doesn't understand the question.
No, he understood it, but he knew it wasn't his place to answer. He's completely lacking in vaginal authority and he knows it. Wow. Okay. So she comes in. And she takes charge, and then she tells him where he's sitting. She orders more and everything. It was great. And I told the guys I was sitting with, I said, this is a real mud shark over here. I said, and she's not going to be bothered by us at all, okay? Because she's fully confident. She's not like this new like jet-setting mud shark creature that just basically uses these young athletic men as sex toys as a way to get back at her grandfather for being successful. That's a different type of creature. It doesn't fit the standard.
That's sort of the temporary mud. Is that the temporary mud shark?
Yeah. I mean, eventually she's going to end up, marrying some European guy that's completely ridden with guilt.
Yeah.
And then the poor drone, he's no longer going to have his minor league sports contract, and he's going to be hanging out on North and Asquith telling guys about this hot blonde bitch he used to go out with. And, that's the end of his life. So. I have a lot of sympathy for these guys. That's why I wrote him into Ire and Ice, okay? That's why I had Sons of Trinity Baxter in there. The Romans couldn't stop this stone cold bitch, okay? The Shawnees couldn't stop her. But these 3 junior hood rats are going to try to stop her, so.
She's slippery.
Yeah, somebody's got to pick up the torch.
All right. Well, the main character, the sort of like present day main character, I thought he was really sympathetic. I liked him, Vito.
Oh yeah, he's based on a guy I used to work with named Mike.
Oh, poor Mike.
His life pretty much went in the same direction as Mike's.
Oh, sad.
That's the guy that starts out as an EMT.
Yeah.
And in a diner, right? Okay.
Yeah, that guy.
Yeah.
That guy.
I felt pretty good about writing him.
That's your secret. You use real people.
Okay. My favorite character is one of the Romans, though.
Which one? Felix?
No, I'm jealous of Felix because that's he's based on Dante, and I've always been jealous of Dante.
Aww.
I've already based like 4 characters on Dante. Okay, so Aptus.
Oh yeah.
Aptus is my favorite. Is my favorite one. So there you go. I wrote it 3 or 4 years ago, but I still remember the assholes in the cast.
The Romans, especially. Oh, I wanted to ask about that because there's some dialogue between those guys. It's like 4 or 5 Roman guys, right, that are sent to go track this awful woman down, and they chat amongst each other. So they talk about when they joined, or can you tell us about how it compares to a modern day stint in the army, like for an enlisted guy or something? Like yeah.
Okay, these guys, any military guys that are out there, they've served with guys like this. They're like the gunny sergeants in the Marines. They're going to be the NCOs, okay, the non-commissioned officers, basically the sergeants. In the Roman Legion, everybody was that kind of guy because they signed up at 21, and I believe it's 20 years.
Oh, wow.
They had to put in. I mean, basically the maximum service that you have to do to get your pension now, that was standard then.
Wow.
And I don't know if this was consciously based on the military system, but basically if you're not going to go into the command structure as a centurion, you're going to be out in 41 years. They're going to
age 41.
Right. You're going to be out at 41. They're going to hopefully settle you near the frontier so that the slave girl that they give you for a wife, she's going to breed some future soldiers. And this did happen. And eventually you end up with a different kind of legion where it's basically a local standing army, and their fathers and grandfathers were legionnaires before that. But this is...
which you do see a little bit, like for the army brat that was born on the base and joins later kind of a thing, too.
Yes, and there was a lot of problems in the Roman military with them wanting to have a female companion. And this being against the law, they couldn't marry until it was time for them to get out. Then they married, and then they bred. All right. The Legion heirs that you're talking about in this story... This is during Vespasian's conquest of Britannia for Claudius. So this is around 50, I think it's around 52 AD. Okay, so these guys are still mostly all raised in Italy. So these are all Italians. There would be auxiliaries that would be from different parts of the empire and different ethnic groups. But these guys would have all been Italians. So this is the next to the last generation of Roman legionnaires where you could compare it to, the modern World War II military experience. If you imagine that the guys that you see depicted in these World War II movies weren't just in it till they won the war, if they had been in it for 20 years and the centurions were basically in it forever, then it would give you an idea. So at least this wasn't a full-blown imperial army yet. It was still conquering an empire. And it wasn't made up of all these different rival ethnicities yet. Okay, so you didn't have any blonde Germanic legionnaires and stuff during this period. These guys are just getting into that.
We're Med. This is a thing now, the Mediterranean. And this reminds me of something, if I can change the subject. I sent you an email, but I don't think you saw it yet because I just sent it before we got on the phone. But Nassim Taleb, who is one of my other interesting people that I like to read, Nassim Taleb, he's Med. That's what made me think of him. He's kind of once in a while he goes on a rant about how Mediterraneans are really white, or either that or that it's racist. To think that white people all have blonde hair and blue eyes is really racist against Mediterraneans. I don't know why. It just makes me laugh. The whole argument just cracks me up because he gets his feelings hurt when people call him an Arab or imply that he's somehow not white or something like that. So anyway, it cracks me up. But the point is that one of his pals is writing a Lebanese English dictionary. Okay. And that has been suppressed by CreateSpace.
That's fascinating.
A Lebanese English dictionary violates their terms. So these guys actually suppressed his book. So it's a friend of his, suppressed the book, and then they wiped out his account. Then they restored his account, but the book is still suppressed. It violates terms. I wanted to show you this.
You put it in my name.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, K for kindergarten.
That's
with
right.
Stars.
With stars.
Right.
It says Gussie up here. He says, good job. So this CreateSpace suppression thing maybe is going to pick up a little bit of publicity.
Yeah, the interesting thing about the way the CreateSpace suppression has been going is, even with me, they did it 4 different ways. This is really, it's haphazard. It's not standardized. It's almost like some people from outside of that organization are contacting somebody inside of that organization, putting pressure on them to do something, and they're doing a half-assed job.
All right.
Okay, so I suspect there's some resistance within this publishing house to doing this.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Oh, and as far as Taleb getting his feelings hurt, it's because of the Mediterraneans. The whole term white comes from the Mediterranean basin. Okay, this was not even a concept among Northern or Middle Europeans. This was just so that all of these rich bastards that lived around the Mediterranean could make sure that their black slaves and their Celtic or Norse slaves didn't get along with each other and didn't identify with each other and slit the master's throat. Okay, so I think it's funny when it bites people. For instance, I have some friends who they're Abrahamic people and they're not Muslims and they're not Christians. I don't know who they could be, but they've confided in me. And one man I was having dinner with, that he thought he found it upsetting that he was sometimes mistaken for a Latino person or an Arab or some Pakistani or a godless Hindu for God's sake. When I was clearly considered a white person, and he regarded himself as just as white as me.
Uh-huh.
And he is. In fact, his people invented the term.
Well, Taleb is Christian, okay? Taleb is an Orthodox Christian, just for the record. I think it's funny. I mean, I felt it a little bit in my life where I have been informed by, once it was a girl at work who was really blonde, natural blonde and blue eyes and everything, and she told me I wasn't white, and I don't really care. I just laugh at it. I think it's quite hilarious, but it's a widespread notion now that, I don't know, you know what I look like.
Yeah, there's girls all over Egypt that are trying to treat their skin with lime so that they could be as white as you. I mean, because it's their beauty standards. The reason why white is the beauty standard in these places, people think it's because it was the race of the masters. That since we have this idea that slave masters have always been white, and that whiteness is the color of the master, and that's why white is a beauty standard, because it's a social standard. No. Okay? As far back as 228 BC, I've read letters discussing how white the Thracian slave girls were.
Yeah.
So this comes from the trade in sex slaves. Okay? White is the beauty standard because that's the color you wanted your sex slave to be.
I think there's broad agreement that men tend to prefer women as their own color or lighter, and also most everybody gets darker as they age, so it's also a marker for youth, which is desirable. So I think that
there's another aspect of it.
What is that?
Okay, and a tan is considered a sign of luxury in industrial civilization.
Right.
But in agrarian civilization, a tan is a death sentence. That means you're out in the fields and you're going to die of exposure. And so the people of status can afford to keep their women inside, and their skin will stay, as pale as their genetics will allow.
Right.
And there's the age thing too. So there's a lot of reasons for it, but basically it all comes down to men wanting their sex toys to be white. And this even went with the Turks, who wanted to have Englishmen as their homosexual sex slaves.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So it even crossed the gender thing. It's just all about sex. And I'm sure youth, luxury, being able to stay inside, these all go into it. But the place where, from earliest times, the place where sex slaves were first trafficked was Europe.
Right.
The Romans did it. The Greeks did it. I mean, everybody did it. And these are all tan people doing this stuff. And they all want pasty-faced slave girls.
Yeah. Everybody can agree on that, I guess. The other things was the McCain funeral, which I thought was obscene. I don't know if you can connect that to any kind of pseudo-religious practice or something where, is there some kind of parallel where a guy dies and everybody just takes a chance to act like I
was shocked that it went for, 8 days.
Yeah.
I was wondering why the flags were all at half-mast here in America. And I found out, I was told. And, I didn't write anything about it. I don't want to speak ill of the dead. A good friend of mine actually put up a video of a flag at half-mast and briefly talked about McCain. So I wrote into his YouTube channel. I said, yes, McCain demonstrated a deep thirst for sending other people's children to die in foreign lands for really questionable purposes. But I think we could forgive him. If you think about it, if this guy was on different military committees when his job as a senator, after you have lost a debate to a professional wrestler, I think if you're in a power position, you're going to be looking to pick a fight that your side could win. And this guy, McCain, actually lost the debate to Ken Shamrock, who by professional wrestling standards was probably the least articulate pro wrestler out there. Okay? I mean, his whole shtick was like, I can kick your ass. I mean, that was it. This guy on the front, I can kick your ass. That's it. He decisively crushed John McCain in a debate when McCain was going on a crusade to ban mixed martial arts. Because I guess anything he could do to make sure that American men stayed emasculated, that was in his wheelhouse. I just am of the opinion that politicians like him are nothing but puppets. He probably never made a decision on his own, ever.
Yeah.
Okay. And went through with it. He's given a playbook by whoever owns him.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, somebody to be pitied. And
I wouldn't go that far. I think he did a lot of evil on his own.
You know who he is to me, if you want to look at the Lord of the Rings?
Yeah.
Is a character that I pitied. The mouth of Sauron.
Yeah,
the Lord of Nazgul could go out and kick ass and do stuff. Even the regular Nazgul were cool. But the mouth of Sauron is kind of like, cadaverous dude on a horse that never really does anything.
Yeah.
Tell you what the Dark Lord wants. Yeah, that's that's a pitiful creature to me. So I couldn't work up hate for somebody like McCain, because he looked, to me, through my life, he looked like a cadaverous puppet on a string.
I think that he does. I agree that he was serving other interests, right? Unseen interests, I think, is a way I could say it. But that doesn't absolve him to me. I think he is a natural born asshole, and he was, because even before he ever got captured, there's some really questionable incidents that could be attributed to him. And one thing I didn't know about that I read about the last few days was that at the end of the Vietnam War, Vietnam returned something like 591 prisoners of war, and quite likely there was the same number still held back. At the time, the leader of Vietnam and Richard Nixon both publicly announced that all the soldiers had been returned. There weren't any left. And throughout the years, there would be signs that there were Americans still there. And so in the Senate, there was formed a committee to investigate this, which of course John McCain was the most important member of this committee. And that committee turned into a committee to bury all the evidence of living POWs. And he went out of his way through the years to discredit any evidence that there were living POWs, and even humiliated some of the wives and relatives of captured men in public, when they came to talk to him, and he just said it's conspiracy theories. And so I think he was capable of his own evil, and he did commit it.
Yeah, I mean, he was a functionary in an evil organism, and he did evil.
Yeah.
That was his job. And talk about a throwaway military. The guys that fought in Vietnam, these guys were betrayed as they were being trained.
Yeah.
There's no question that the men in that generation that served in the military were shat upon by their masters. Okay, and the restructuring that began in the 1970s brings you to the new mercenary military that we have now, where yes, they're mostly indigenous Americans that are serving in it, but it's a mercenary contract. It's not, it's no longer a national army. I really think that people in charge of the U.S. government at the time had no qualms about breaking the teeth of the military that had served in past wars, in a bid to be able to exchange it for a mercenary military. I don't think it was this miscalculation that led to demoralization that led to the ending of the draft. I think it's an actual calculation that you're going to break the spirit of these four branches of this military, and then when that happens, you're going to have carte blanche to form a mercenary military. And the interim mercenary military is the people working for the GI Bill college tuition. But the end goal is to have nothing but military contractors. That's the end goal. It's probably still 30 years down the line. Okay, eventually we need to bring this military back and use it to suppress dissent in the United States. Okay, then you need straight up military contractors for that. So I think we're about halfway through the evolution that started in the mid-70s as the fallout of this betrayal of the American national fighting men. And I think it was by design, and I don't think there was an accident about it. But I'm just a crackpot. Now, as far as McCain, I do think that this is a very interesting illustration as to how important it is for an illegitimate government to have a member of that government that has actually suffered somehow in the course of fighting for that government overseas in the military.
All right.
Okay. I think that's why, 8 days of mourning for this guy?
Theatrical mourning.
I think only Elvis beat that. Okay. But no president beat that.
Yeah.
I mean, this guy is more mourned than anybody by the powers. And
by the powers who were calling him a Nazi in 2008.
Yeah.
And who he immediately reconciled with, and I mean that episode is forgotten, and these are people who absolutely reviled him in 2008.
Well, at least there's something he's got in common with Ken Shamrock in professional wrestling. I mean, these guys pretend to hate each other when they're in the ring,
right.
but they all go to Denny's and eat together.
Sure.
Okay.
That's accurate. Yeah.
It shows you how important that it is to have some kind of a hawkish political figure that has an actual military background where they suffered.
All right. And those are getting, in shorter supply too, I think. Yeah.
I don't know who else is out there as far as people who have run for office or anything, but this is a guy, look at how important Colin Powell was for bringing up national morale for the 19... Yeah, this is a guy, I think Colin Powell and his platoon in Vietnam got caught on a rice paddy and bombed or something like that. Something crappy happened to him.
Right. So
to people that knew his history, he was also a sympathetic character. And you got McCain too. You're running out of those. So I guess they just felt like they had to milk that legacy sympathy for as much as they could. And that goes all the way back to Rome, with how important it was to have men serving. And, when guys like Julius Caesar weren't supposed to take over the army and come back and take down the country, they were just supposed to go out there to get this legitimacy that they went out and they bled and they fought and they led for the Republic. And then they come back and then they're supposed to get into some type of rotational office, sometimes working privately, sometimes publicly, on behalf of the public, and their moral standing all comes from this leadership experience they had. And the Roman military leadership was generally half-assed because it was being a general or a consul was essentially a transitional thing for you. It's something you did as part of your career path, and some guys would eventually. The emperor became just that. He was a professional general, and that's how he kept his power. But that's in the empire. In the Republic, you had this McCain-like figure was always supposed to be the president. In fact, Julius Caesar, a lot of his moral standing came from the fact that when he was a rich young guy, he was kidnapped by pirates. He was held prisoner by pirates. And then he made sure when they let him go that he came back and punished him. So he got this moral standing, and it helped him a lot. So it's going to be harder and harder. You're going to need more disinformation, more mind-fucking, sorry for using that word, just more media massaging of the tiny American ape's brain to keep everybody on board now, because you're no longer going to have even a phony cutout character like McCain to lead the war and to point the way. I mean, you're just not.
Well, that's a big part of this Trump shakeup. It illustrates the fact that this theatrical mourning parade has been going on, and that Trump was not invited to any of the elements of it, just shows how he doesn't belong to that group of people. And it's not a guarantee, right? Like, everybody on the left and the right, in this mainstream left and right, who agreed that McCain was a good guy and he was model for bipartisan whatever. Well, those people are all the same people who want to keep going to war. So it just gives me hope that, we're still on the right side of this. And nobody knows what's going to happen with Trump or, what his real intentions are. But for me, it's another good sign that...
There was a greater American than McCain was mourned this weekend, and there was a presidential presence.
And who is that?
At the celebration of her life. Aretha Franklin.
Yeah.
I'd have fought some dudes for Aretha Franklin when she was young, okay? Just to keep them from scratching the paint on her pink Cadillac, okay? But there was a photo I saw of this attractive young mulattress singing on stage.
Oh.
And behind her to her left is Slick William Jefferson Clinton.
He looks like a reanimated corpse.
Yeah.
He's all bright-eyed.
Yeah. It's like, He's looking at her like, yeah,
Like he hasn't eaten in weeks.
yeah. So somebody bagged this girl backstage and like put her on ice in the basement of a pizzeria for me,
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, he had this like really creepy predatory look on his.
Yeah. And then another girl, I don't know if it was the same singer or a different one, who got groped by the minister up in front of everyone at Aretha's service.
That's what they're there for. They're the bait, I mean.
Yeah, you have pointed out that that's kind of standard in some of your ghetto writings, that the minister gets privileges.
Oh yeah. Well, it's like being an ancient patriarch in the Old Testament. Okay, you get your privileges. All right, so that's. I think it goes with the ministry, particularly if you're going to be ministering in a dangerous place like Harm City, then people should know that you're a man that matters, and there's no better way than to demonstrate that than to taking more than your mathematical share of the available frail companionship.
One thing I admired about Aretha is that she did not care for flying. I don't have a phobia. I fly if I have to, but if I had her money, I would do this, which is she had luxury buses and I think she had a car as well. So that when she wanted to go on tour, that's how she would travel. She would never fly.
Well, she was a girl that had some hips, so flying in any airline seat.
She had more than hips.
Probably posed some problems, so I'm sure there's some logistical things there. Yeah. You want to pinch the curves up. Speaking of Aretha Franklin, now that we have a president that was not a general and did not serve in the military, almost all the presidents in my lifetime, they all had some kind of commanding capacity. I think mostly Navy captains in the U.S. Navy. And he wasn't a professional politician. Although he's really a construction guy, he did dabble in entertainment. Perhaps in the future, idiocracy will once again be proven as it stands as a template for what America is going to become. Maybe we will only have entertainers as presidents in the future.
Yeah.
Either they're information tech people. I know the information tech people, since now they're the generals, okay? I know they're going to try for it, but none of these guys are going to have the personality. So they're going to have to, they're going to join the bankers as the reptilian underlords behind the scenes and get their pretty puppets out there dancing around. And I think, I definitely think that we should have a transsexual amputee rapper as a president.
Please.
In 8 years, at least.
Please don't.
Well, see, and I think you're going to have to put entertainment in there. See, I don't think somebody like whatever he became Manning, okay, I don't think that's going to work.
No.
Okay? It's a sympathy card, and people do want a leader. But I think if you could get somebody from a sympathetic slice of the population, for instance, like if an alien crash landed, even if she was a stone cold bitch, okay, or some other kind of welfare mama, but if they could entertain, if they were entertaining.
Yeah.
A lot of what keeps Trump alive is people on the fence don't go to the other side because, most of us hate all these people. I never liked Donald Trump, okay, but he's mixing up with all these people who I also never liked. It's just like cutting them down. It's you see a bunch of dogs fighting and you don't like dogs. Eventually, you're going to kind of like the dog that can chew all the other dogs up. So I think entertainment is just got to be part of the future puppet presidency.
I think so, but I think to some extent it's always been there because it's almost implied in the word statesman, It's somebody who can get up in front of people and capture their attention and capture their imagination. And nowadays, if you can do that, you're on TV or you're on something. So I think that's right. There has to be that element of it. I think one thing that is really going into high gear right now is that on the left, if you're a white guy there's just no room for you. That you really cannot be nominated for office. You can't have a position of leadership. It's to the point where the diversity push is so
I think
extreme.
there's plenty of room for white guys on the left. Okay?
Really?
As a group, they're highly emasculated. What they have to do is just learn a new role. Okay? They got to wash mama's panties. They got to hold her clipboard. They got to hold her sign. They got to pick her up after some meathead proud boy punches her, whatever. And what I would suggest is that what the soy boys on the left need to do, okay, is that they need to go to the Mudshark Drone Academy. So like my poor boy who, as soon as he gains 10 pounds, the guy at the IHAT last week, that gorgeous blonde's dumping him for like a fresher model, right?
Ew.
He's going to need something to do to support himself, when he reaches the old age of 25. So maybe he could coach these soy boys on to how to keep your mama happy when she's running shit, right? So I think there's plenty of room for sissy white American men on the left. And I wish they would, all the sissies and all the soy boys would actually go to the left, okay?
Yeah.
I think that's great.
That's great. That's fine for me. But the point is they can't be at the top of the ticket, of a presidential ticket. You can't have a white guy in that spot.
Well, that's not their job anymore, is it?
That's right.
The top position has been usurped, okay? Okay, so the boys are on the bottom.
That's right.
If you do that, if you can get all the sissies in America to go left, then that's going to cause this estrogen implosion on the left, and it's going to drive authentic women, okay, like women that actually, want a real man, okay?
Yeah.
It's going to drive them all to the right. And then eventually the country will be taken back over by a bunch of women who want real men. And then they'll turn it over because they won't know what the hell to do with it. I mean, women can't run anything except publishing books. Make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Okay.
Yeah. Oh no. Sorry, I don't make those. That's an American thing. I can't eat peanut butter and jelly, and I can't drink milk. Those are things you will know. That's something you'll notice that foreigners just cannot eat is peanut butter and jelly.
Yeah, I worked with this guy from Australia once, and he just, after a year of eating in America, he said, if it's not melted cheese, it's mayonnaise. You cannot eat anything without melted cheese and mayonnaise.
Yeah.
It totally horrified him.
Yeah. I have no quarrel with melted cheese, and mayonnaise has its applications. I don't argue with you on the misogyny stuff.
Okay.
Actually, oh, no, there's more. There's more.
Okay.
You want more? Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know who Theresa May is?
Is she cute?
No. She's...
I mean, you just start showing me pictures. If you would ask my opinion of a woman, I mean, you can flash the name up or say it if you want, but
okay.
I need a picture.
All right. Theresa May is, you don't need a picture. She's a middle-aged English woman. She's the Prime Minister of England, of the United Kingdom. And she went to South Africa and did some kind of, primitive dance with the people there. And she made the statement that that Britain stands with South Africa in this, what are we going to call it? Land reform or expropriation, or really, it's the genocide of the Boers, the Afrikaners. So she actually made that statement that Britain supports that, which just makes my skin crawl. And then between her and Merkel, who Merkel almost single-handedly has sunk Europe beneath the tide of migrants, and then I just think, imagine if we had Hillary. That is like the trifecta of the most odious women in history. And
I'm glad that she did the dance. I'd like to see Bob Sack pick her up and throw into a volcano, but that's probably not going to happen. He's probably still losing fights somewhere in Japan.
I think it would upset the volcano. That's not what the volcano wants.
look, eventually what's going to happen in South Africa is people in the governments involved are gearing up with it, including the U.S. government. Eventually there's going to be a video released of an Afrikaner with a firearm standing over top of a dead person of color.
Innocent, unarmed person.
Which will probably be one of maybe 20 guys that tried to murder this guy, okay? Right. Whatever. That's all you're going to see. This is where the Zimmerman Trayvon Martin thing leads. Eventually, you're going to see an aerial photo of this Afrikaner who defended himself against a mob of people who came to kill him, and then U.S. military is going to be piloting helicopters.
No, I don't think so. You might be right, but it won't be under Trump.
Oh.
He has tweeted, Trump tweets all day long, right? But it's a big deal when he does, and he tweeted in support of South Africans who are being dispossessed.
Oh, I believe that, but it's going to take a while to play out, and eventually we're going to have U.S. flying machines are going to be over there big game hunting in South Africa, and the big game that they're going to be hunting is going to be Afrikaners, because it's going to be in support of the South African government, which is probably going to have a lot of problems operating its own military when they start wiping out all the sort of basically run their military. Okay, so they're going to need help. It's going to come from, it might be British SAS. I'm sure there's going to be military contractors who used to serve in the U.S. doing it. And as soon as we get a Democrat in there, we're going to have boots on the ground, rounding up pale faces. Okay, and putting them behind.
Well, you have to think about the role of China also, because this is, I hate to put it this way, but the way it turns out a lot of times, it's like the blacks are just pawn between the two real power players, which are the Boers and the Chinese now, because we know from Zimbabwe that when you take away the land from the white farmers, the country is going to starve, right? And
go back to its natural state eventually. If you would just leave these people alone, they'd reach equilibrium with their environment.
Sure.
And,
yeah.
Eventually, they'd find a way to harness all that Wakandan heavy water and start putting up satellites and take over the world. But until then, I think we should leave them alone.
Well, I think so too. But I think that I saw that China and the South African racial categorizations that they have now, the Chinese have secured a special status.
I can explain this to you pretty simply.
Okay.
And actually, if you ever watched the movie, it's a Jason Statham movie, High Voltage. Crank, High Voltage. Okay. Well, you watch that, it will explain the whole situation to you. When you're running a strip club or a whorehouse, okay, and I mean it's the closest analogy to a government, okay. All right. When you're running a strip club or a whorehouse, to found it, you always have a white guy founding it. Usually some, swarmy Italian or Portuguese guy. Or
say what you really mean.
Okay. So you'll have a white guy will found the strip club. Then after a while, the increase in violence will bring a black front man on board to actually run it for the white guy. Okay, because the white guy doesn't want to get shot. All right. Then eventually it gets bought out by the Chinese and they start running it. Okay. And then they hire people of all races and they play them off against each other. So if you look at the way whorehouses and strip clubs devolve and you just apply that to the national model, that's what you're going to see in South Africa and everywhere else. We'll see it here too. Eventually somebody's going to sell the United States to China, and then the Chinese are going to be hiring ex-American military guys to move Americans around so they can get all the nice the busloads. They bring Chinese in by the train in the part of the country I'm in right now. It's ridiculous.
For tourism or for what?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. It's an avalanche. So, and this is just tip of the iceberg. Eventually, they're going to have to utilize former American military personnel to move Americans out of the way of Chinese tourists. Okay. So, but anyways, just watch Crank, High Voltage, and it'll explain to you how nation states devolve. Okay. And it's basically just a club model.
I love that. A movie recommendation from the Crackpot Podcast. I don't watch movies. I'm not really able to do it. But some of you listeners surely do watch movies, so maybe you'll enjoy it. I think that was a good one, James. We covered a lot of interesting current events.
Oh, thank you. I didn't even know they were current until you told me about them. Okay, well,
Yeah.
I'm glad that I could delve into universal behavior models to try to plumb the future. It's this deep and dark.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes it's really not what I want to see. You know, President Kanye, that thought does not please me.
Oh,
But in New Mexico a few weeks ago, the law enforcement came upon this compound with some African Muslim families, some kind of multiple family, where there was a whole bunch of children, at least one dead child, and all kinds of weird stuff going on. Supposedly, they were training the children to be school shooters. There was, I think, another 11 children on this site. So all the adults were arrested. I don't know what's become of the children. But most of the adults, as far as I know, have now been released. The one lead guy was released without bond, just walked out of court. And certain charges, like the prosecutor was somehow unable to give enough proof to make a charge, so they let a bunch of other people walk out. The really interesting thing is that while these people were away from the compound, it was mysteriously destroyed. It got blown up. Okay, so because I'm crazy and paranoid, somewhat a little bit like you, or insane. You're insane. I'm crazy.
yes.
But to me, this looks like, well, there's even more. The guy is related to someone who was involved with 9/11. The owner of the property has, for years, begged local law enforcement to evict these people. He wanted them out. He said, all kinds of strange things are going on. I want them off my property. Local law enforcement blew him off for years and years. And then as soon as this thing kind of comes to light, the whole thing is just blown up mysteriously. And charges don't seem to be getting filed or sticking or whatever. So if I were a person of absolutely no credibility, which is pretty much what I am, I would say that our own government is involved in this, maybe like some 3-letter organization or something, because they tell us we knew who these people were. They're on our watch lists or whatever. There were complaints to local law enforcement. Local law enforcement's hands were tied. So I don't know. I mean, if you haven't heard of this story, I don't know if you have a reaction, but, just talking about the U.S. government and its activities.
I did read up on the story that you talked about. Not very deeply. I just read 2 articles about it. Look, the U.S. government is the police station for whoever runs the international economy, okay? And, the military is like the SWAT team and everything. So I wouldn't pin this on the U.S. government, partially because I'm terrified of them, okay? But I think whoever is actually running the government and doing things like shooting country music concert goers and making sure that every time Trump doesn't do what his handlers want him to do, that a certain number of suburban high school students get shot by some fatherless suburban high school student. I just suppose that this is like the rubber tanks. They used to have these inflatable tanks that they put up all over one area of England to make the Germans think in World War II that they were going to come right across the channel.
Oh.
That they were going to go to a certain landing
Decoys,
area.
Yeah.
So I think people have to be, even as stupid as Americans are, some of them have to be thinking to themselves, you know what? There's been more school shootings since this guy's got in office than any other president around. Maybe somebody in the government is mad at him and they're killing school students to make it look like he's a bad president. Maybe that's happening. Well, if whoever is telling the U.S. government to do what it does, if they think that this is a real possibility, that opinion could swing this way, then you want to set up phony operations. Get somebody's weird son-in-law and send him out in the desert and say, look, learn how to milk goats. And then show up and arrest him and say, oh, well, it was a mistake, and then blow his goat milking operation up and let everybody go. So it goes out in the news. I just think that it's like a false flag operation that's intended to explain these unexplainable murders of our high school students and other people the nightclub in Miami, the country music thing in Las Vegas. This stuff was all conducted at such a level that either somebody in the government had to run it or somebody that's immune to the government had to run it. And I would say the latter. Somebody the government can't touch. Maybe Dick Cheney's got a bunch of military contractors doing this shit. I don't know.
I don't know if that's where I would go with it, but I think this idea of being untouchable is correct. And that's one thing that kind of riled them up a few weeks ago was when Trump was withdrawing their clearances, their security clearances. So, you're talking about people who are quote unquote retired from government but still have security clearances.
And they're working for these organizations. And who knows what? Foreign governments. They're probably working for foreign governments.
Yeah, they got to earn a living. Yeah, so I see it as these people who, I think there's a layer of people who have this really, truly highest level of secrecy and resources that is above all other government reach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as people call it the deep state, maybe it's the extra state. I don't know.
Yeah, super state.
The whole thing just smells like that to me. But I'm a crackpot, so I would like to think that some creepy old dude like Dick Cheney, but it's he's probably just one of the moving parts in the machine. Well, he's probably not even a moving part anymore.
he's got
he's
not
probably
too. Yeah. I'm sure he's there. I'm sure he's involved in. I mean, I don't know if he was at any of those McCain festivities, but there they are parading before us.
I did think it was a little bit funny when I was grouse hunting and I was being the bird dog. Yeah. Okay, I said to the guy who was with me, I was like, "So, this is the kind of hunt you take your political enemies on?" And he looked at me. He said, "Yeah, but a lot farther out." I do think that this is going to be used to at least psychologically buffer the population for the next round of school shootings, which should be just about on deck.
Yeah,
by the time this airs, we should have another school shooting because
school's back. I don't like that. I don't want to think about that. But I see it maybe a little bit differently. I think of these secret groups as having a lot of projects going, a lot of people in process in whatever they think they're doing, and that this one just kind of got out of hand and they had to pull the plug and blew everything up, blew up the evidence. That's my interpretation. It's two different crackpot interpretations.
Okay.
For the listeners.
Believe me, both of those interpretations are more realistic than what you're going to hear.
Oh, sure. Well, the concept that in this incredibly weird and high-profile, what should be high-profile case, that the prosecutors just, oopsie, we didn't file the paper. Too bad, you're free to go. It's absurd. It's absolutely absurd.
Lock up your buddy's nephew that you just gave a job to do this? No. I mean, it's you've got to, when you're recruiting people like this for your operations, they got to know they're not going to do a hard time.
Right.
A little bit of street cred. They're still going to get paid under the table.
Yeah.
I think it's something like the stuff in the '60s with all the weirdo stuff that went on there, all the bombings and everything. What's going on now makes me think that a lot of that was not anarchists.
It's practice.
That a lot of that stuff was really done on behalf of our rulers. And this might be the last podcast I do before I leave the Rocky Mountains. Okay, so I got to say one thing about the Rocky Mountains. White women. I said it totally brought. It's totally brought the Negro out of me. I didn't live in Baltimore. I didn't know how good looking white women were. I'm like a one-eyed dog in the meat market out here.
Oh, jeez.
I'll be coming back for a visit. All right.
Okay. Thanks a lot, guys.
What do you want? There is no more. If you find a place, please let me know. Take me with you when you go. Take me with you when you go. Take me with you you go.